Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. I hope you're doing well today because we've got a ton to talk about with F1 25's brand new update, version 1.12. And I'm not just talking about some little tweaks or a quick hotfix. This is a patch that really changes the feel of the game, brings in some big content drops, and fixes a bunch of things that players have been pointing out since release. So get comfortable because we're going to spend some real time breaking this down together, going through every detail, and I'll give you my thoughts on why certain changes matter more than others, what this means if you're into career mode, multiplayer, or just racing against the AI, and whether or not this update pushes the game closer to what fans have been asking for. First off, let's set the stage, because Update 1.112 isn't just a random patch dropped out of nowhere. Codemasters timed this one around mid-September 2025, and they rolled it out in waves with some pretty exciting content. On September 15th, they added the full Formula 2 2025 season to the game, so that's all the cars, all the drivers, all the teams, basically a brand new championship slotting in alongside the existing F1 content. That's huge for people who like to play career mode starting from F2, or for anyone who enjoys the extra challenge of those cars, since they handle completely differently. But that's not all, because with that same drop, they also pushed out what they're calling the F1 Sports Update. That's basically a refresh of visuals, sponsorships, and other little real-world details that have changed since the start of the season. So if you've been annoyed by liveries being outdated or sponsors being wrong, this update starts to clean all that up and get it more accurate to what we're seeing on TV each weekend. 2 days later, on the 17th, they refreshed the Podium Pass. That means new tiers, new cosmetics, and new items in the store. So if you're someone who likes customizing your driver, car, or just grinding through those tiers, there's a fresh set of rewards to chase. Then on the 18th, they updated the driver ratings again, taking into account real-world performances from the Belgian Grand Prix through Italy at Monza. And we all know driver ratings can spark debates, because maybe you think your favorite driver deserves more pace or better awareness, or maybe you feel like some of the AI rivals got a little too generous of a bump. Either way, Codemasters is keeping that system alive and reactive to real races, which is something I personally enjoy, because it keeps the game tied to the actual season. Now, let's talk about the actual patch notes for 1.12, because this is where things start to get really interesting. The headline change, the thing people are going to feel the most the second they jump back in, is the AI update. Codemasters tweaked the way computer-controlled drivers approach braking zones and corner exits. In simple terms, they're now braking later when entering corners, but they're not accelerating as aggressively when exiting. So, if you're wondering what that means in practice, think about those situations where the AI would sometimes feel robotic. They'd slow down too early, cut into the corner with unnatural precision, then launch out of the exit with what felt like traction that didn't match your own experience. That's been adjusted. The result of this change is that AI lap times stay pretty much the same in dry conditions. So which is smart because you don't want to suddenly ruin all the balancing work people have done with their difficulty levels. But in wet weather, their lap times are now slightly slower. And that's important because before this patch, a lot of players complained that AI seemed like superheroes in the rain, pulling away even when you were driving a perfect lap. So making them a touch slower there brings balance and fairness. More importantly, though, the way they move on track now should feel more natural. They're hitting apexes in a way that looks like a human driver would. And when you're racing wheel to wheel, it should lead to smoother, more believable interactions. For me, that's a big win because immersion is everything in a racing game. And nothing breaks immersion faster than when the AI feels like a script instead of an opponent. Switching over to career mode, they addressed a crash bug that was happening in two-player career, specifically when moving from one season into the next. If you've been playing that mode with a friend and you suddenly couldn't continue, you know how frustrating that is. Losing all your progress, having to restart or work around with weird save fixes, it's a mood killer. This patch finally clears that up, so you and your buddy can carry your careers forward without fearing that end-of-season transition. It's one of those fixes that doesn't sound huge in a list of patch notes, but if it was happening to you, it's probably the most important line in the whole update. Now, for the hardware people out there, this update touches on peripherals too. Specifically, they fixed a problem with Logitech's G923 wheel and its TrueForce technology. If you don't know, TrueForce is Logitech's system that feeds extra feedback directly into the wheel, giving you a more connected feel to the engine vibrations, road surfaces, and all that detail. The bug was that TrueForce wasn't behaving properly until you paused and unpaused or used a rewind. So basically, you weren't getting the full experience unless you triggered a workaround. That's finally fixed. So TrueForce works as intended from the get-go, and anyone using that wheel can now enjoy the feedback without jumping through hoops. Audio got a few much needed fixes too. Before this patch, the race engineer's voice could overlap if you unpaused mid-message, or even sometimes just during normal sessions. Imagine trying to focus on your strategy and suddenly two lines of radio chatter are playing on top of each other. It was messy. They've cleaned that up, so messages now queue properly instead of clashing. They also fixed overlapping lines that could randomly happen mid-session, and they even added missing subtitles for podium commentary, which is great for accessibility and for anyone who plays with the sound low or off. Visually, they ironed out a couple of quirks. Some players noticed odd lighting bleeding into cockpits, which just shouldn't happen in a game that prides itself on realism, and that's been resolved. Over at Suzuka, some of the trees were rendering incorrectly, looking out of place or glitchy, so they fixed that as well. These might sound small, but for a game where presentation is everything, polishing up those rough edges makes a difference. They also touched on split-screen multiplayer, making sure the position numbers for both players now show correctly. Before, you might have had situations where it wasn't displaying properly, which is confusing when you're trying to race against someone right next to you. On top of that, they cleaned up issues in the decal editor, making sure numbers and sponsors display more accurately. And of course, they threw in the usual UI improvements and stability improvements, which are catch-all terms, but they matter because every time the game runs smoother, crashes less, or presents information more clearly, that's a step forward. Now, let me give you some thoughts on why these changes matter in the bigger picture. With the AI tweaks, Codemasters is really tackling immersion. For years, one of the biggest complaints about AI has been that they don't behave like real racers. They're either too cautious or too robotic. And while difficulty sliders let you tune their lap times, they don't fix their personality on track. This patch shows Codemasters is listening, because instead of just adjusting pace, they're actually changing how the AI approaches corners. That's the kind of stuff that makes you feel like you're battling another human being, not just a line of code. The wet weather change is especially interesting. For many players, wet races were almost unplayable unless you lowered the AI difficulty by a huge chunk because they were just absurdly quick. Now with this adjustment, the range should feel fairer. You'll still need skill and precision, but you won't be punished just because the AI had some hidden grip advantage coded in. That levels the playing field and makes wet weather racing fun again, instead of something you dread when the forecast turns. The career mode fix is just a quality of life savior. It's one of those bugs that really hurts the longevity of the game, because a career mode should be something you invest weeks or months into. And if you hit a brick wall because of a crash bug, it kills motivation. Clearing that up is crucial for keeping people engaged long-term. For hardware users, it's nice to see Codemasters paying attention to wheel support. Logitech's TrueForce is a big selling point for their gear, and if it wasn't working properly, that undermines the investment people made in buying that wheel. Fixing it shows they care about giving players the best experience regardless of what setup they're on. And then there's the little stuff. Overlapping audio, missing subtitles, random lighting bugs, trees at Suzuka. All of those add up. On their own, maybe not a big deal. But when you're playing a game like this, where realism and presentation matter so much, each little distraction chips away at the immersion.